Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and today we have a very special guest, a man who needs no intro, but I'll give one anyways. One of the biggest streamers in Hearthstone, very popular YouTube channel, very popular caster as well, and most importantly for us, one of the top arena players according to Blizzard, the one and only Kripparrian. How's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm usually the how's it going guy. So how's it going with you guys?
Not bad, not bad. Glad
First
that
thing we do, we steal things you say.
Okay. All right.
But so Kripparrian is an expert arena player. We're really looking forward to getting his analysis. First, just want to ask a few questions. So, Krip, how'd you get into Hearthstone? Basically, you were one of the first people on the scene, and kind of
Yeah.
you blew up along with Hearthstone. You were big before that as well. But tell us about the beginning a little bit.
Well, I was playing a lot of different games. I had been playing primarily Path of Exile for a bit over a year before Hearthstone went into like there was like the alpha, and I think there was like a beta, but there was like the beta that you couldn't stream. Well, I was fortunate enough that the beta that you could stream, I realized I had an invitation to it on the day that you could stream it. And it was largely because I was just trying to hop through different games. I was kind of tired of Path of Exile at the time, and I was hopping from Final Fantasy XIV, which I had a miserable experience playing. So I was really looking forward to something new, and I was just very lucky that a fan of mine who now works for Blizzard sent me an invite. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, instant satisfaction playing Hearthstone for the first few times. I played Magic the Gathering. I bought my first packs in like, I don't know, like fourth edition, and then like Weatherlight came out or something like very long time ago. I played on and off until like the Ravnica block, and then I did a few more like release drafts. Just because it's really fun to bully noobs when you go to live events because they're terrible. So I did that. I played like Pokemon. One of my favorite card games was actually the Pokemon card game on like Game Boy. I played that again like I don't know, a few months back on stream.
Oh my
And
gosh,
that
I
was
love that game. That was
There's a
ridiculous.
Pokemon card game on, not like the Pokemon game on Game Boy,
No.
but like a Pokemon
Yeah.
card.
Yeah, and it's
Wow.
really good. It's really
It's
good.
ridiculous. Yeah, one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
I'm not even
So
kidding.
Hearthstone was like extremely up my alley on the mechanics side, but also I was like hardcore World of Warcraft player. Like in Wrath of the Lich King, I was in the top guild in the U.S. I was doing everything I could. I was running a good part of the guild and Exodus. And I thought in Wrath of the Lich King I'd be playing World of Warcraft for like the rest of my life. So I was like very like invested into like the World of Warcraft stuff, like the lore. It's like, oh man, get to see Arthas, and then when I pick up Hearthstone for the first time, it's like, oh dude, Tauren Warrior, that guy sounds so cool. It's like I'm playing World of Warcraft again. Yeah, actually, Tauren Warrior was like one of my favorite cards when I first started playing Hearthstone because just of how he behaved. He's like, what do you say, like Earth Mother, watch over me. It's like, whoa, what a badass. The first time I played World of Warcraft, I made a Tauren Warrior. I'm like, oh, I want to be a total badass, and that ended up falling through a little bit, but yeah, still, it was.
There you go.
It was very, very nostalgic experience in a new and very exciting way.
Yeah. So, as people will watch your stream. They see you play some constructed. They also see you play some arena. I tend to think of you more as sort of an arena player, but so what, you definitely play both, but what appeals to you about the constructed side, and what appeals to you about the arena side?
So I've never really been like a constructed player in almost any of the card games I've played. Like when I played Magic, I just did Friday Night Magic stuff because it was kind of cool to, on the spot make a deck out of what you have. I feel like in card games, making the best out of a bad situation is like the most fun aspect of it because it really pushes your ability to like be creative. And that aspect just keeps a game fresh for me again and again. So constructed just doesn't really have like holding power, like it doesn't hold my attention. I really just play what's fun, which is why I guess I play a lot of Tavern Brawl. I really milk every drop out of the adventure modes when they do come out. So yeah, I just play what's fun. Hearthstone's arena mode, in my opinion, is the most fun. But now it's a bit more competitive in terms of the enjoyment level, at least for me, because when there's new cards being released, well, it's not exactly true. When there's new relevant cards being released, Constructed is very interesting because nobody knows what to play, so you can just try your own thing, and the overall power level of the decks isn't as horribly not fun to play against, I guess.
Right.
Because everyone's experimenting, so you get to experiment yourself without just like losing to every like perfectly crafted deck that's been through 18 iterations of like pros tweaking.
Yeah. It's also that players who play ranked and are not good at ranked, who just copy other people's like aggro decks, also can't win very much when they don't know what they're playing against.
Right.
So even those players who's like, I'm just a face hunter player, even those guys tend to try a few things when there's new cards. And I like to keep Arena in mind while I do this because you also get to try cards that you... it takes you a longer time to develop an opinion on if you play them only in Arena. So it's especially true for like epic cards, which aren't like like legendaries are irrelevant. You know, who are we kidding, right? But like epic cards are so rare that you actually draft specific ones and draw them in significant scenarios that if you don't actually try them in Constructed, you really have a very poor understanding of how the card would behave the first few tries at it. But epics are also often on a power level that's high enough to define your deck. So I like that I'm doing more things than just, you know, screwing around in Constructed when I'm playing Constructed. But Arena is the fun mode for me. You get to do your best to draft a deck, and you know, some Arena runs go horribly and are really not fun. But in the general sense, it is a very exciting way to play the game where you really have to push your limits for you know, making the best out of a bad situation usually.
Cool. So Krip, I want to ask you this question just because you have played so many games. We were talking about Path of Exile, WoW, D3. I actually watched you stream Inferno Diablo live. That was pretty cool, you and Krippy.
Yeah.
So what do you think makes Hearthstone so successful? Because I didn't expect Hearthstone to blow up like this, and I wanted your take on it.
So I think a big aspect is that Hearthstone is a very fun game to be involved in when you're like watching someone else play, when it comes to discussing things, when it comes to new content coming out. Like in World of Warcraft, if like a new dungeon comes out, it's like, yeah, whatever, you know, okay, I just missed it. I get some loot on the next one. But in Hearthstone, usually when a new set comes out, it's very significant. The gameplay changes very significantly. It's kind of like this in most card games, but I don't know. It seems to fit very well in Hearthstone. Usually the number of players that play a game, the success of it, doesn't actually often have much to do with how good the game is. It seems very unintuitive, but that's just the case. Like if you compare it to, like you mentioned, Path of Exile. Path of Exile, when I played it at least, I don't really know exactly now because there's probably a lot more ARPGs out there, and Path of Exile has changed a lot since then. I think for the better, but I'm not sure because I haven't played it enough. But at the time, it was without a doubt the best ARPG ever, and the ARPG genre had like a huge fan base, but still it wasn't that popular of a game. Like not really, not compared to like any like big game that's coming up like next week on PlayStation or anything like that, where like millions of people just go and buy it. So I think Hearthstone is set apart from a lot of the others. One, because it's a Blizzard game. Two, because it has the predefined like audience from like the Warcraft genre, like myself.
Yeah.
It pulls people in who just are interested in card games as a whole. There's a lot of people with that. And overall, it just keeps them. It keeps them because it is a very good game, but it's also a very good community game, as I mentioned, and that's why I think it's a very good game for streaming. And the streaming scene kind of keeps the game going because you're like the streamers and the people who make YouTube videos, they kind of add to the game. If nobody streamed the game, if nobody made like YouTube videos on the game, you would just be playing the game. But Hearthstone has this aspect where it's so enjoyable to watch what other people are doing that almost everybody who plays is interested in this community side of the game, which is also like huge these days. Like World of Warcraft wasn't the best MMO I played, but it was like the absolute best community within an MMO that I played. And if you factor that into the overall game experience, that is why World of Warcraft is the most successful MMO out there ever. And I think that aspect is very similar in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that's what hit me first. So I came way after you had already been streaming in beta for Hearthstone. The game's already picked up. I came in an open beta in January of 2015. It's the first time I've ever heard of Hearthstone. And as soon as I came in and I started reading what people were posting, reading the questions, I was a total noob trying to figure things out, and I just got this very distinct impression that was really surprising to me. The percentage of people who were, in the community and playing this game and really enjoying this wonderful game that actually had played like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or some kind of TCG before was remarkably low, in my opinion, because Blizzard had just made such a fun game that tied it into Warcraft that people who were interested in a whole other genre came in and got exposed and experienced Hearthstone, and it created this very nice community where there were all skill levels, everybody was coming in, and then the streaming side really reinforced all of that, because when you're a streamer, you're talking to many different levels of players, and you're building a community. And like you said, I didn't have the WoW experience, but at least from what I saw in Hearthstone, it was instantly a very much more community feel than something like I had been exposed to the Magic the Gathering scene before, which was more of almost like a professional kind of feel where everybody really knew what they were doing, and they really the focus was on how to tweak this one deck or this one card rather than just going out there and having fun as kind of the first goal before you get to this other stuff.
Yeah. I think it's easy to see afterwards why Hearthstone has been so successful as a streaming game. You just have so much so much time to interact with your audience. I've watched some CS:GO streams and also some LOL streams, and because those players need to be so focused every freaking second, it's tough for them to interact. And also, it's just with Hearthstone, not just the time, you're able to really follow what everyone's doing, right? For those games, even if you have an understanding, it's tough to get that top level understanding. And in Hearthstone, you can not only watch this person, they have time to explain it to you. And because of kind of the simplistic nature, you can read what is on the cards. It makes sense afterwards. But initially I was like, what? There's this card game. There's no way I'll be able to compete with, the big boys. But here we are, right?
Yeah. Hearthstone has the unique aspect that it is a decision-making game, and everyone has their own opinion on the decision that's being made. So even though there's not always something going on, if people are fully engaged, there is something going on in their minds. And the aspect of instant satisfaction on all the decisions being made is one that really expedites the learning process, and I think the connection between the viewer and the presenter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can in the other games you may be a spectator or a fan, but in Hearthstone you can play right along. Yeah. And every single time you want to make a decision different than the streamer, and if the streamer makes a decision and the streamer is wrong, or even if the streamer was right but it turns out to have a bad effect, you're involved. It's a really good kind of feedback loop. But I actually So you were streaming this from kind of the beginning of Hearthstone beta. You were there through many iterations of when you started streaming, Arena wasn't even what it is now. You couldn't even get 12 wins. It was capped at I think 9 or something. This is my reading the history of Hearthstone, because I was not in the scene at all.
You got 9 wins a lot. You got 9 wins a lot.
Because okay, that makes sense, because you're in beta. People have no idea what they're doing, and if you did, you get 9 wins. Or is it just that they capped it at too low of a number so that everybody got 9 wins a lot?
I think the matchmaking in Arena changed. Originally, it just make you against whatever. I remember
totally random matching.
Yeah, I played against the same person 3 times in 4 games, which is not possible. It's only possible if you're at I lost against the same person 3 times in 4 games. So yeah, so it's
you played against them 4 times. Or
no.
Oh, okay.
No. But it was I lost. I was at 3-0 or something, and then I lost 1, and then the next game I lost against the same person. And then I played someone else, I won, and then I lost again on my 4th win against the same person. So it was very clear that there was literally no matchmaking when I first started playing the game. None. You just whoever was queuing up, that's who you played. That's it. End. and it changed, I think, several times. I know Blizzard talked about this, and it's often what people cite, that it only matchmakes you against the people who have the same number of wins.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain that's not the case today. I'm 100% sure that's not the case today.
Yeah.
I mean, Blizzard has come out and said it. I think in BlizzCon, or in one of the interviews that was happening at this year's BlizzCon, that there's a separate queue kind of for new players, at least, that you play in, or new accounts that you play in, even in the arena, until you get like X number of wins or something before they kick you out into the real world, where you get matched with more experienced players. So at least that part is siloed off in the beginning for players. And I'm sure it's much more complicated than that, that they, have no need to explain to us. And also, it's going to be really difficult to explain a whole matchmaking system to everybody.
Yeah. Well, back then, very few people played the game well. Actually, I think it's safe to say that because the information curve and most of the mechanics weren't fully understood, that nobody played well by today's standards.
Yeah.
Like the level of top play was below the level of top play today. Like that's just no brainer. So because of that, you faced like a very wide spectrum of people, and because there was no matchmaking, you could just have absolute crap deck and go like 9-0, and because it was capped out at 9 rather than 12, and there was no matchmaking against other people who were at like 8 wins when you were at 8 wins.
Right.
The success was very well shared across a lot of people, but people who weren't very good had very inconsistent experience.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, yeah. So then they changed the matchmaking, they upped the win rate, they changed the reward system, and by the time I had stepped in January 2014, the arena was kind of exactly where the arena is today, as far as I can tell, right? Like, if I had stepped in today versus where I actually started playing this game, the visually, the rewards, everything just kind of looked about the same. And the main innovations in the arena had kind of the thinking, the Team 5 huddling together and thinking, okay, how do we make this game mode? What do people want? How does this stuff improve? That has seen results and has actually been released to the public. That part was done before I came in, and now we have gone almost 2 full years of the arena pretty much being the arena, which is on one hand really good because they've kind of, at least from what I saw, and maybe I want to know your opinions about this, but from what I saw in the arena, it seemed to work right off the bat as soon as I stepped into it. Like, the matchmaking was very good. I mean, it could obviously be improved, but generally speaking, there was matchmaking. I felt like as I was getting more wins with the deck, I was facing tougher opponents, tougher decks. And
it does seem that was there for quite some time now.
Yeah, and the getting 12 wins felt like a really big accomplishment because it was really difficult to do, and then even after I'd done it, it was really difficult to do consistently, and even now it's difficult to do consistently with even really good decks. There's just enough RNG in the game that 12 was actually kind of, I think, still the perfect number to kind of put a pin in it, where if you're really good, you still can't ever even come close to guaranteeing a 12-win run, even with the best decks. And if you're kind of just like an above average player, that's something you can hit, but only now and then, and so it keeps it going. And so I don't know, how did you feel about how Blizzard progressed into the 12 wins? Because I have no experience with the 9-win system, with the old non-matchmaking system. Like, was that just a quantum leap in how much better the arena got, or was that kind of more like a gradual improvement the way when it was being pushed out in beta that you had experienced?
I think it was just a lot easier to get max wins before, because I think when they had the 9-win system, like during that time, I think you just played against anybody still. I think they changed that aspect when they introduced the 12-win system.
Okay.
So yeah, getting 9 wins wasn't as big of a deal, but it just happened all the time. The other aspect is that when you got 9 wins, you still only got like 3 reward boxes, I believe.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get much more than like 150 gold, even if you did really well. But like, you just wouldn't go below 7 wins. I know people kept their win records around that time, and like all the top arena streamers had like almost 80% win rate. And you just can't have that now. It's like nobody has 80% win rate, right? It doesn't exist. It's because you could go 9-2, 9-1, 9-0 so frequently. and you wouldn't have to accumulate many losses at all. So you just lost more as a good player when they moved it to 12. But at the same time, yeah, you did have much more intense games in the last few.
Yeah. All right, so Krip, let's put out this hypothetical. And because we haven't seen major innovations in the arena for basically 2 years, you're Blizzard. You can do anything you want with the arena, with realistic expectations. And golden cards have already been implemented, so you can't, do that. What would you do?
Ben Bro's already talked about as golden cards. I think they're going to be implemented, but I think Blizzard's working on something.
Cards from your collection, you can get them golden in arena.
Yeah, something like that. Ben Bro's been talking about it for a few months, so it's coming.
2.5 years ago, directly to them and publicly.
So your suggestion now will be implemented in 2018.
Okay, let's think about it. In the arena.
Yep. And
I don't know.
Limited resources.
Maybe you can get me started. Like, what do you think arena would? Like, just some thoughts at the top of your head.
Look, I would like some sort of competition, some sort of ladder or some sort of ranking system. The implementation is going to be hard because if it's just by pure record, then everyone's going to play the top classes and you're going to have no one playing like priest or shaman, those bottom classes.
We have that already.
Yeah, you kind of do, but then it'll push it even further along, right? And so, but I do want sort of a way for there to be a little bit more competition in the arena between arena players, because right now it's a very, you can try hard in the arena, but it's still sort of a casual mode where it doesn't really matter. Like in ranked, that your ranking matters, right? You can compare yourself with other players, or if not a ranking system like what I just said, make it so that you can set up arena tournaments with your friends. That would be so cool. I think that would add to the fun factor.
Like a fireside gathering kind of thing, but for the arena. I mean, I would like that, but that's not coming anytime soon. Blizzard was talking about tournament mode, and they were talking about it like, we're still working out how to best do this. Not hey, we're wink wink, maybe soon. So I think that's a little far off. I know this. I don't know if other groups have been doing it, but there's this French group that's been kind of hosting seasonal ladder competitions for the arena, where they get people. You have to be streaming it so it's verifiable. You can't use the same classes. You have to do, I think it's like 4 or like 7 in a month, and then based on your record, you get prizes for it. And I mean, I think we're talking about it. We may actually join in the fun in January when they do another season, just to have something more to do when we're playing the arena games we normally do. But Blizzard, it seems like an excellent thing, and not a terribly difficult thing for Blizzard to implement something like that for groups, or just so you can show people the record.
Okay, I think it's very difficult to move the seriousness and competitiveness of Hearthstone Arena too high, because it's unquestionably lower to demonstrate than a constructed skill set. Yep. It's just because the variance is so much higher.
Yeah.
So that might happen, but it's only going to happen to a certain degree. I think the main problem with Arena is probably accessibility. Because a lot of people play it once or twice, they don't do well, and then they're intimidated on investing their gold into more runs. So I think a lot of people want to try Arena, but just don't because they're afraid of it. So I think the biggest thing Blizzard could do is maybe have different levels of Arena. Maybe you could have an Arena that at the end you don't get rewards, but you can play for free, and maybe you can just play against people who are normally playing Arena, or you could have a 2-tier Arena system where you have a very low entry fee, or just something that you can enter let's say twice a day for free, and if you win that, or if you win a certain number, then you get a ticket to play real Arena for free or something like that. Just I think that's really what it's missing. I think Arena is just missing accessibility for players who aren't experienced. Because Constructed, you pick up Constructed, you're at rank 20, you're probably having more fun than people who are at rank 5, honestly, because they're playing the same deck every single time. But Arena is the opposite. The players who have the most experience are having the most fun. So that's the big problem.
Yeah. I have not thought about that. Just putting putting a different risk reward system in play for new players or for new players in the arena or players who don't want to commit in the arena, almost like casual mode versus ranked mode for ranked right now, but probably implemented a bit better so that the casual mode is actually going to stay a little more casual rather than just being a place for experimentation of decks. And yeah, I think that would be a really good thing for the arena, and it'll also make the more competitive part of the arena better for more competitive players because, I mean, I have fun playing when I'm like 0-1 because I lost the first game to BS or like, my deck sucks, and then facing an opponent and being like, oh, okay, I hope he doesn't quit at the end of this game considering how bad I'm going to destroy him. But less of that would be good in a normal grind up to your like 7, 8 or whatever average that you end up getting. And this will be a good way to make it so that even getting to like 5-6 wins for a top player would be a more of a challenge because you're only facing people who are really serious, who have committed more money than they normally do, more gold than they normally do when they play the arena, and so they're like really focused and they're like not walking around with their phone on mobile with a bad connection and like paying attention to 18 things at once.
Yeah. I think that'd be good, and because a lot of people do see arena as kind of like the weird stepchild, it's just this like sideshow, and constructed as the main event, and we obviously want that to grow a little bit. I don't think it'll ever get to the constructed sort of pedestal, but we do want growth any way possible, and I like that idea. There's obviously some difficulties in implementation, but they just have to do something at this point. I don't think.
I think they will do something. I think they have something either already planned or they're working really hard right now on a plan because it's been 2 years of nothing, and that's a lot of time of nothing. So I can't imagine that they've actually just started the game with 2 main game modes and they've completely like left one on the side with no plans to like get back to it and like kind of buff it up a little. I think that's definitely
understandable.
Yeah.
What?
All right.
I wouldn't be sure that they're working on something, but I mean, I think either one is entirely possible. There might
You're
just
giving
be
it 50-50?
I think it's actually more likely they have nothing big in plan for Arena than they do, as you suggest.
Then they do. All right. Well, I just think they have something big in plan for Hearthstone in general. Because if you look at Ranked, what big thing have they even done in Ranked since they released it? They've created the new reward system over the summer, which is definitely helpful because until then there was actually no reason to rank up unless you got to Legend. And even then it was kind of, you get to Legend the first time and you get something, and after that really nothing. So that was a really good change, but that's been the only change in Ranked so far.
Right. So why expect anything more from Arena?
Because they got to do more things for Rank too. They gotta. This is just.
They have more things to do for Rank than Arena. I think Arena is a better system to enjoy the game than Constructed. So, yeah, I think actually Rank needs more work than Arena does, and it's not getting it. So I think it's very optimistic to say that they're spending a lot of time improving the Arena experience.
All right. So, Krip. Lastly, I want to ask you, you're someone who, throughout your history, you've studied games very intricately, you've sort of min-maxed, and you've innovated as well to get to the top of the games that you played. Tell us how you've kind of applied this philosophy to Hearthstone.
Well, Hearthstone is a game that you actually don't have to be like the absolute best at. You just kind of have to be in the good range. If you know what you're doing, variance is going to kind of dictate the day-to-day play. So you don't really get to show your skill from much. I don't know. The way that I see Hearthstone is I'm really like thirsty for knowledge. Like I really love learning things, how cards work, how they interact with one another. Fine decision making, like macro decision making, all this stuff. It's just like super interesting to me, and it's kind of been why I've ended up being good at a lot of the other games. But yeah, for Hearthstone, Like, yeah, I feel I understand all the different aspects. It's just unlike a lot of other games where it's very difficult to demonstrate your knowledge in a short time period. Like, even I think even the best constructed players in the world, you know, they're like probably the difference between the best ranked player in the world and the 200 best ranked player in the world is probably uh, like a point oh something difference in win rate, maybe a point value, like a tenth
Yeah,
in percentage in win rate.
I
So I
believe it.
mean, yeah, it's very very hard to distinguish yourself as the best. It mostly has to do with recent results, which are often based on RNG. So I try not to really look at that too much. Just have fun, learn as much as possible, and be as involved as possible, and the results come from that.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's really interesting what you just said. That so unlike other games in which the top players can always demonstrate their skill, Hearthstone is kind of like it's like poker, right? Like the best
Yeah.
players in the world will overall earn a lot more money in their career, and it's just like what you said, that 0.1% kind of extrapolated over time, that'll create a lot more wins. But on any given day, any given game, kind of a newbie, or maybe not a pure newbie, but like just an average player can beat the top players in the world because of draws, because of deck, and because of matchups, right?
Yeah, and you look at World Series of Poker, the final table. There's not a lot of repeats. You look at Hearthstone World Championships. There's not a lot of repeats when it comes to the like being at the BlizzCon, the final like 8 or the final 16 or whatever. And that's to be expected because that's the kind of game that this is. And it doesn't mean the game is not determined by, well, it doesn't mean the game isn't a huge doesn't have a huge portion that is determined by skill. It just means there's also a huge portion determined by RNG, so that you can't get so much consistency that you can guarantee that the top people are always at the top. But overall, you're going to see these names win more championships, win more tournaments than people who are like a level below that.
Yep. All right, should we move on to deep fried meta?
Let's do it. Let's move on to what you guys are here to listen to. Deep Fried Meta, where we deep fried the meta today with Krip. I don't know what deep frying the meta is, but we're going to do it. And the League of Explorers is fully out now. Fully 100% out. The 25% bonus, or maybe more, who knows, is kicking in. It feels like 20% though, just judging by what cards that I've been seeing around. It feels like it's actually still just the 25%. But now that all the cards are out, now that the the TGT bonus has been gone for like more than a month, and the LoE bonus has kicked in, what are the best classes? What did you think the best classes were for during TGT, and do you think that that's changed now that LoE is finally fully out and we're going to be more or less in this meta for the next like 2, 3, 4 months?
Well, I've seen a lot less rogues recently. That's a pretty big thing. I think you guys expected Rogue to still be #1. It definitely doesn't seem bad whenever I play it, so I can't disagree with that. But it seems like more people are leaning towards Paladin and Mage, and it feels like on some days it's Paladin, on other days it's Mage. Like, it's not like it's one Paladin, one Mage. It's like on one day you just face 6 Paladins in a row, on the other day you face 7 Mages in a row.
That's my exact experience.
Yeah, I don't really understand it. I feel like right after cards get released, but before people really understand them, you have a moment in the meta where perception artificially skews what's actually going on. So I think that might be why we're seeing a lot more Mages and Paladins, and honestly, in a few weeks, neither of those two classes might be like the best.
Yeah, I understand why people are picking those. Just because if we look at the power cards that have come out, and this is something we want to throw around as well. Paladins have Keeper of Ultiman, and now that has an increased offering rate, like that's just a ridiculous card. And Mages have Ethereal Conjurer with an increased offering rate as well. And it just helps these two classes in such a unique way. With Mages, Ethereal Conjurer allows the Mage to play a more grindy, fatigue style, sort of attrition style, where they can play for card advantage. And dropping a 6/3 body is really good in the mid game, especially if you're facing kind of just one big minion on the other side, or if it's an empty board. And you can usually draw a very good card for the situation. And for Paladins, Keeper of Ultimate, Krip, we talked about this when we were on Value Town last time. Like, it just allows Paladins to do something they haven't really been able to do, with the exception of Outdoor Peacekeeper, which is a rare card. And now they can have like 4 Keeper of Ultimans in one deck and just like keeper everything on their side of the board, on your side of the board, and just win like that.
I wonder if you're talking about a specific deck, Merps.
I've played so many Keeper of Wildemars recently that I feel I usually actually use them to tempo out my opponent in the mid game more than the late game.
Yeah.
It's like if you have like a 3/1 minion and they have like a 2/3 minion, you just buff it up just to gain the tempo advantage.
Yeah.
You kind of use it like a Dark Iron, kind of. The opposite of a Dark Iron.
A better Dark Iron, because your guy lives.
Well, it's kind of like an opposite Dark Iron. It's like a gain 2 health for the turn, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like I use it in that situation a lot, but it is really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to gauge. I think right now it's hard to gauge for sure. But as far as the Ethereal Conjure, I think that card is more threatening in a tempo mage than a control mage. It's just good all around. Like, there's no denying that.
Yeah.
But it's like, if I'm losing and they play that, I feel so compelled to use any hard removal or answer I have on that card. So because it threatens 6 attack, and you know that if he's played in a winning situation, that he the mage almost certainly has another way to deal additional direct damage. Yeah. It's like, if I don't remove that, I'm probably just dead. So even if you do remove that, you know, what do they do? Tempo wise, you traded a hard removal or like a big removal for his 5-drop, which is going to happen anyway, but they netted like maybe a fireball. You have nothing, right?
Yeah. And they'll pick the fireball because they know that they have the advantage, and they know that they probably want the face damage. So if it shows up, and remember, for Discover, class cards are showing up 5 times as often as neutral cards. They're going to throw something at your face. I agree. I think it's better for a tempo deck actually than a control deck. Although of course it's great for all decks, just because the 6/3 stat distribution, right? It's meant to be aggressive, and it's meant that you put it down, your opponent has to remove it. If you're playing control, if your opponent has anything small on the board, you kind of can't put it down. You don't get a lot of good value out of it compared to what it would otherwise be. Although you do get the card advantage. So if you're in a control deck with crowd control, it kind of works. If you're in one where you're trying to like dig for one, it's kind of a toss-up whether you get that Blizzard, you get that Cone of Cold, that Flame Strike. But regardless, right? That's why we have it as the best card in LoE. And we have it there because it's good in all decks. And mages, I see every mage I see has an Ethereal Conjurer now. I'm guaranteed to see it if I see a mage.
The class that I thought would increase the most in power would be Druid. I've drafted a few Druids, but I think I've somehow managed to not pick any of the Druid cards. And when I did, I never drew them in the runs. But I think the Raptor is really powerful. Like, whenever it's played against me, I kind of don't really know what to do. It has a Shredder effect, even though it's I don't think it's quite on the same power level as Shredder. It has that effect where it's like, well, that's gonna amount to it killing my 4-drop if I play my 4-drop. If I play my 3-drop, I'm just gonna be behind. I don't want to kill it because something bad might come out of it. So, you know, it's just like a horrible situation every way you look at it. Even though, again, it's a little bit, it's not quite, it's just only a little bit below the Shredder power level, in my opinion. And then you have the Raven Idol. I don't think you guys think the Raven Idol is very good, but I still think it is. I think it's very good.
You think it's better than tracking, right? If I remember this from Value Town?
There's no question. There's no question it's better than tracking. Like, if you just play it for a minion, you're getting a good minion almost every single time. If you play it for a spell, you're getting reach. And in Arena, 1-drops are so important, so you can just play it on turn 1 because most likely you won't have a 1-drop because it's very hard to actually get good 1-drops in Arena, even though they're so important. So yeah, I feel like Druid has the potential to overtake some of these classes, but I feel Perception is dictating a lot of the classes that you see right now in Arena as the popular ones.
Yeah. I agree. I think after everything settles in and after everyone kind of has a handle on these cards, and especially very powerful cards, I think take a while to sort of settle in. We saw this with Murloc Knight as well, and kind of how people reacted to Murloc Knight and how they sort of, you got to
panic
save
baskets
some
everywhere.
removals. Yeah, and how people reacted to the lessened AOEs that are provided in TGT. Like people will react accordingly, and we'll see how everything shakes out. But I think that's just what happens when you have kind of snowball or just like very high power cards. You're going to see that a lot, and that's kind of what we see. And there are some cards that have some potential to be to push classes higher up on the list, but stuff like Mounted Raptor. I've always been a fan of Pit Snake, so that might like push the rogues a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But I do agree. Right now, the top two classes in terms of appearance-wise, it's Paladin and Mage.
So let me lay down my predictions on this, which is that, and I completely agree with what both of you just said, and it's that people are going to change, and they haven't quite adopted to the true power levels of the classes yet. And so that's why Paladin is still overrepresented, being what most people perceive to be the best class and had the most success with in TGT, and that Mage hasn't quite caught back up yet. It's weird. It's so weird for me to say, like, oh yeah, people are not thinking that Mage is, as good as it really is, but they're not. I think a lot of people still think Mage is like the second best class to Paladin right now if you're an average player, and I think Mage was probably now the best class again if you're an average player. And Rogue is always one of those classes where it takes like a slightly higher skill level for you to really grasp it, but that's going to be hurt because Paladin players are going to go down. You're going to see less and less Paladins up there on the ridiculous levels now that, not that Keeper of Oldemon is bad, but it's more that Keeper of Oldemon, and this is my theory on Keeper of Oldemon, it's that it's a ridiculously complicated card where there's no card like it in the arena, and so people will not know how to use it, and it will take a very long time for most players to really use it at a good level, and they will almost never get to the point where they use it at an optimal level. Like you were talking about before, where you usually use it on your own minions to get a good trade. That's something that I think most players will just completely miss half the time and not even see that as an option or as a desirable option, when it's usually even more desirable to be able to tempo out like that and control the board, especially as a Paladin, than to save it for like a Force Tech Max or a Devilsaur or whatever your opponent's playing. And between, it's just a very complicated card, and I found myself like learning something new about the card every time I play a run with it. And I've played like maybe 6 Paladin runs so far with it, and I'm still learning new things with it. And I think I may not be the fastest player at adopting new cards, but I'm still probably significantly above the average player's adoption rate. So it'll take them even longer. And Paladin was really good. And you see in terms of their representation, because it was such an easy class to play. You put your stuff out, you tempo out, and then you buff your minions when you could, and it's almost always the right move, and then you hit your opponents, and then you win. Keeper of Oldemon, while not lowering the the power level of the Paladin, has upped the skill level of the Paladin. And that in and of itself is going to make more players have less success with the Paladin. And that's why Rogue will be impacted negatively, because Rogue is a great matchup against Paladins. So the less Paladins you see, the less Rogues you see.
Yeah, that's true. You still see a lot of Paladins, but you don't see quite as many Rogues as you did in TGT, though. So yeah, I actually don't know why you don't see quite as many Rogues. I don't know.
I think
I just haven't. I haven't seen as many Rogues as Major Paladin. I'm sure of that. I'm sure I have not.
I agree with you. The observations are the same. I've seen a lot more mages than in TGT, and I've seen less Paladins, but still a lot of them. But Rogue it was never that frequently seen in TGT, but now it's even less.
Yeah, I think the problem with Rogue is it's very kind of confusing for some players. And I haven't done a lot of coaching, but just from sort of watching people play Rogue and also just doing some coaching, a lot of people are overwhelmed. With some classes, it's easy to put down your 2, decide whether or not to trade. Put down your 3, decide whether or not to trade, and put down your 4, and then you enter the mid game, and things get complicated. But at least you had that kind of simple early game. With the rogue, nothing is simple, right?
And it's the same for every class, that kind of mentality, right? You put down
Yeah.
a minion, you decide what to do with it. You put down a minion, you decide what to do with it.
Yeah, and with the rogue, if you have the coin, or even if not, you have like Buccaneers and Undercity Valiant, and now kind of you have to decide whether or not is Pit Snake right for this turn, because in order to get max value, and if they ping, you have to make sure that like if it's on turn 3 and they ping, they don't have a 1, then you're ahead. A lot of those considerations, and if you don't optimize your turns as a rogue, you either take too much damage or you just kind of run out of steam as well. Like both of those are possible. So I think that kind of pushes people away from the rogue.
I think Pit Snake is a really fun card. I think the closest card to Pit Snake is actually Mirror Entity, because that's what you do with it.
Yeah.
You don't
That's
usually play it on
interesting.
turn 2. You play it when you know your opponent has to make a big play, and then you block them.
Yeah, I think it's and that's why I think it's a very skillful card in that way. Like it's not skillful in terms of you need to do something with it. You know, like you need to impact the board or like buff up something on the board. It's skillful in the way that like you said, you're making reads throughout the game, and after you make reads throughout the game, like you capitalize on those reads and then play a Pit Snake. Like it's the ultimate kind of expectation buster in terms of I know exactly what you want to do now based on your previous turns. Deal with this. You can't do what you want to do. And then that, because of the rogue and the pressure that the rogue can put on, you could just win the game from a Pit Snake like that.
All right. Okay. let's move on to the next topic. We have before we do that. So, because next is a question from the GOAT, and before we get there, I'd like to thank our patrons who make this Lightforge podcast possible. In November, our top patrons were 4P, Penguin, Capsize Games, HT Rajan, Matt H, Paul H, Punk Rockin, and Ugbog. Thank you guys for your support. If you're listening to the podcast and you would like to support us, it's patreon.com/grinninggoat. And now I think Merps has the question from the GOAT now.
Yeah. All right, Krip. This is something I really want to see how you answer. The question from the GOAT for this week is create a card for an underpowered class in the arena. So, don't pick any of the classes we just talked about. But, for one of those classes, I'd want to know kind of what card do you think could really help them out in the arena?
Okay, let's think. So it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be a shaman or priest card.
Okay.
Now, who do we help the most here? I feel like I've just not seen priest after like 5 wins for a few weeks now. So let's give the offer to priest. What does priest need? Priest needs a way to either manipulate its hero power, which it does so already, but kind of badly because they're very slow mechanics. Or they need some kind of early game that doesn't blow. What if we give priests like a turn 1 play that blocks other plays but doesn't get punished? What if priest gets a 1-mana 1/3 stealth?
Oh.
1-mana 1/3 stealth. Oh god. I'm just imagining seeing it on my opponent's board and just panicking immediately because I know what's going to happen next.
Valen's Chosen.
Yep.
Valen's Chosen.
Oh, that is so scary.
3/7 on the board for the priest on turn 2.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if people were afraid of the player 2 Northshire Cleric coin Valen's Chosen, well, this is even more of a guarantee. And
Yeah, but the problem with Northshire Cleric is you're the priest, you play Northshire, and sometimes you have to do it into their 1-drop, and you often get punished, or you don't go second, and it's like, do I play the Northshire or not? You play the Northshire, and he plays a 3/2, and then you're screwed. So I feel like that's the problem with the Northshire, but the Northshire has the advantage of late game. It's a crazy good card, so it has to be like, 1/3 stealth. I think that's fair, because it's not that good in the late game, but it's much better. It's much more safe in the early game.
I like it. So I have an idea to throw out as well. It's not totally my idea. I read about like
Who'd you steal it from?
it was someone on Reddit. I don't know because people have these posts all the time, right? People have these posts all the time.
Okay.
I thought this was a good idea. And Krip, I totally agree with you. I think priests need a little bit of help in the early game. So this would be a 2-mana minion. So 2 mana, 1/3, and if all of your mana crystals are used this turn, gains +2 attack. So it becomes a 3/3 if you used up all of your mana crystals. So on turn 2, it's guaranteed 3/3. So it becomes a little bit awkward. You get the benefit of a 3/3 on turn 3. It's a terrible 3-drop unless you have a 1-drop. But on turn 2, you can make it a 3/3, which dominates all 2/3s, which are pretty popular in the arena right now. So there's a huge upside. There's also a significant downside as well. And later on, where you can guarantee you can get off the effect, like on turn 6, you put down a 4-drop and a 2-drop. It doesn't really matter that that's a 3/3 anymore. So I thought that was a really interesting card that wouldn't be overpowered, but could push priests into a stronger earlier game.
The thing is, I think priests are so horrible in arena they could just get an overpowered early game card. It's not gonna break the game. It's not like we're giving Paladin an overpowered early game card again. We're giving Priest an overpowered early game card.
There you go. Let's just give them a shielded mini bot. Let's just call it something different, screw creativity. Let's just give them shielded mini bot, call it something different, and call it a day. There you go.
I feel like your idea is good. I think it'll accomplish part of that goal, but I think Priest might still be the bottom of arena. I think it'll have the totem golem effect. I think it's really good. It definitely has some huge punish plays, but it's just not significant enough.
Yeah, and that's what's really tough about the arena because of the random offerings. One card is just really not going to do it. The one card has to be spectacular.
But if you have 2 cards and you get rid of a certain expansion bonus that was making a lot of your class's really crappy cards be offered a lot, and then you add a bonus where you offer these good cards a lot, and they're all common class cards. I don't know, maybe some changes can happen. Maybe some changes already happened to
what a novel idea.
To one of the underpowered classes. We'll get to that. We're kind of on a ramp right now between this question to the next question to the actual talk of the new arena class. Garrosh the Warrior, Magni the Warrior. There's a lot of work has been done on it, and we'll get to that. But my idea for a card would be, and I think I've said this before at some other time. I really like the idea, even though it seems like so derivative of another card. So it's like Rockbiter Weapon, but for the Warrior, it's a 1 mana, 3 damage weapon with 1 durability, and that's it.
Oh, I see.
Unlike Rockbiter, you can't buff something. Wind Fury doesn't do anything, and unlike Rockbiter, it's not a spell. It doesn't trigger as many things, but it's a weapon, so it triggers a bunch of weapon things, and you can hold it and not use it. But it takes the space of your weapon, so if you have a weapon, it'll be bad, and you can't hit 2 things in 1 turn. It's a lot of different. It makes it very warrior-y, and I just like the idea of the warrior having 1 mana weapons. I think that's so important for what the class kind of wants to do and what it can do, and it opens up the field a little bit more. So when you have a class that is so dependent on kind of getting on the board and so dependent on being able to use its flexibility, you either have to give it a lot more armor, which I understand is not a feasible thing to do due to constructed, or what you need to do is to give it more ways to do things with 1 mana. So that's why Warbot's not even that bad, just because it's 1 mana.
I like that, but I've played a few warrior runs recently, and I think the main success of those warrior runs are actually the card Heroic Strike.
Yeah.
Which is kind of undermined by having weapons like that.
That's true.
So I'm not sure which aspect I like more. I had a lot of fun with Heroic Strike on my last warrior run. I think I had 2, and it was the first time I realized it's well, if I'm gonna win, this card is just better than Flame Cannon, which is crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
as long as you don't have a weapon equipped, that card is better than Flame Cannon.
Right. So,
you really saw that card get a lot better. We were raising its score all throughout TGT as there was way less Fiery War Axes. Because that was the Fiery War Axe was kind of what was making Heroic Strike not one of the greatest cards ever. and it still is in a way, but once you lower the offering rates of Fiery War Axe, you're no longer expected to get 2 of them in every single warrior deck. Well, now Heroic Strike looks really good as a substitute.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump off from that and go into card good bad. Card good bad, where we tell you whether a card is good or bad. And our guest, Krip, chose the next card. I think it's an excellent card, and it's definitely a card that's worth a lot more discussion. And I'm sure people will be discussing it for, like, the next year, because it's such a unique card, and it is Cursed Blade. If you guys don't remember Cursed Blade, it is a rare warrior card. LoE just got added to the latest wing, and it is a 1-mana, 2/3 weapon that doubles the amount of damage you take as long as you have it. Mm-hmm. So, Krip, why don't you start us off? Card good, bad, what do you think?
So I picked the card because all the thoughts that I have along this card, I have very low confidence in. So I thought it was probably the most controversial card out of League of Explorers. Well, let's compare the good sides and the bad side. The bad side is that it's bad, and then you'll probably die if you can't make use of the effect. But the good side is, if you can make use of the effect, we talked about how insanely good it is to have 1-drops. Yep. This is like the most insane 1-drop for tempo that you can possibly ever get, right?
6 damage, 1 mana.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's probably not going to do that. It's probably going to kill a 2-drop and help you trade up against their 3-drop. That's probably what it's going to do, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe even deny the 1-drop. Deny the 1-drop, kill the 2-drop, trade up on the 3-drop. That's like the dream.
Yep.
You can't expect more than that. I mean, expecting more than that, you're just living in like fairy tales, right? It's just not happening. You're not killing 3/3/2 creatures in sequence with this weapon. Okay. But like, how frequently does it do that? I think there are quite a few 2/3 minions right now, but we've seen like that swap back and forth based on what people are playing. I think if suddenly people are no longer picking Paladin as much and they're playing like Druid, then maybe 3/2 creatures would actually gain favor. And if 3/2 creatures gain favor, this is like a very good answer to that. The main issue with Cursed Blade is that it's horrific in the late game. Like, I think there is no worse late game card than Cursed Blade. Yep. And while the early game is still, I think right now it's on the edge. I think it's generally a bad card, but a small shift, like people picking 3/2 creatures overall more than 2/3 creatures, I think that shift would actually make the card like pretty good. Like, let's just say good, not like slightly bad.
Huh. I mean, I agree with that entire analysis, and especially the late game part, where the correct choice oftentimes, if you're in kind of a back and forth late game, when you draw that card, is this is a dead card, I'm never going to play it. Unfortunately, I have drawn a card worse than a Wisp. Let's just leave it at that. And if you don't realize that, you play the card and then you die. So that's just something you have to recognize with the card. It is the downside of the card. It is the, so much worse than Zombie Chow in the late game. It's not even funny kind of card. But in the early game, Zombie Chow will get you 2 damage, maybe 4. This will get you, somewhere a number of damage that will end up eating at least one of your opponent's cards, maybe 1.5, not entirely unlikely 2, and you will end up with like half your health that you had when you started it with. So it's also a card that you can play as long as you have some health to give to, like, as a buffer. Like if you have 20 health or something, or like 30 health, even if it's in the mid game, you can play this card, and you can use this card. Your opponent only has 2 turns if you're using this card. If you're throwing it to your opponent's face, if you have nothing to hit every turn, so your opponent gets 2 turns in which to deal damage to your face, and this card's a liability. So I think most people think about it in terms of 3 because it has 3 charges, but especially if you're taking it and it's not like turn 1. I don't even know if on turn 1, 2, and 3 I would ever hold an extra charge of this card for the value, just because I'd be so scared of the face damage. But definitely if you're playing in the mid game, you're not holding it. Everything's going face. You're replacing it, right? You can get rid of its effect by replacing it with another weapon kind of on a later turn if you need to. So there's a little bit more flexibility of that than I think that you had brought up when it comes to the mid game part of it, or when you're just up on the board with a lot of health.
Well, I think the main like live or die on this card is, okay, let's say the opponent is a warrior. He has 2 charges left on Cursed Blade.
Mm-hmm.
Do you play a 3/2 creature into your opponent's Cursed Blade?
There's going to be a good case for it, depending on how much reach you have. Depends on like how long you expect the game to go on for. If you think you could finish your opponent off pretty soon, you do it, because he can only armor up 2 armor per turn.
This is what I like about Cursed Blade. It opens up these scenarios, right? Where you've had classical scenarios like, can I race them down? And now it opens up that window, but the window will close at a certain point as well, right? And then you're facing warriors, so you don't like. That's what I love about the card. I think the design of the card is tremendous. It is.
Yes.
It is a very well designed card. As for whether it's good or not, it depends on the situation. It depends on the rest of your deck. It depends on, kind of like responses back and forth. And that's what makes it a well-designed card. And we'll see. Like, this is the card that when it came out, I was talking to ADWCTA, and we weren't exactly sure. I think a lot of the cards for this expansion are very easy to rate. Like, the good cards, you can pretty much see that they're good. The bad cards, they're pretty terrible. And then there's Cursed Blade, and we're like, we don't know. Like, the benefits are so great and the downsides are just so bad that it's got to be somewhere in the middle, but who knows where it is.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I could see in looking for this card is just a 2 damage reach. And sometimes you're looking for that.
Yeah.
But that's really it. That's the end all be all. I had a lot of fun with this card. I know it doesn't really apply to Arena much. It's with Blingtron, because Blingtron can produce a Cursed Blade.
Nice.
Really, I talked about this in one of my last few streams. Your opponent can get Cursed Blade, and you can get Gore Howl for 14 damage. And if you have 8 damage on the board, you can do 30 damage from a Blingtron, right? So it's just, I don't know. I think Blingtron's a lot better because of this card. Basically, it allows you to have a lot more games close out where you're otherwise in a fairly marginal situation.
Yeah, and it's not that infrequent. Well, maybe not both of them like lining up exactly like that, but Cursed Blade won't very infrequently appear because there are only so many weapons in the game.
It's like 17 or something now.
Yeah,
right?
So this will be not a infrequent scenario. Like, you may think about it like, oh, it's like a Doomsayer, right? You hear it, you think, oh, it's like a Doomsayer coming out of a Pilot Shredder. You make Troden if it happens, but it's not really going to happen all that often. Well, we've all seen Doomsayer come out of the Shredder often enough to know that, 1, it does happen, and 2, Doomsayer is one of like 70 cards?
Yeah.
This is 1 out of 16, 17 weapons, so
maybe 20. I don't know. It's something like that.
It's part of a strategy that is not like a total shoot the moon strategy. It's you get a 5% chance.
It's around there.
Yeah,
it's not bad. It'll happen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the warrior in general now. Like the LoE warrior. We always do a co-op after the stream, and this week the gods have picked the warrior, which is great because I really want to play more warrior. I've always said that ever since LoE, ever since the TGT bonus went away and the LoE cards came for the warrior, this has just been such a good class. And we've talked about it in the latest tier list write-up. My warrior record right now is 12,99999 for wins. I just haven't gotten below 9 wins with a warrior. And it's had good decks, it's had bad decks, it's a low sample size, whatever, but I was averaging less than 6 wins per run in TGT with Warrior, so this is such a tremendous sea change for me in the Warrior that it's kind of I would not have predicted it anywhere near this degree. And there's a lot of other players too who are just talking to me and saying hey, Warrior doesn't seem like it's that bad anymore. Is it even the worst class anymore? Is it kind of now an okay class again, just with 1 expansion? What's been happening?
Yeah, it feels like I think Warrior's not the worst. And I was mostly just citing my own results when coming to that conclusion. And I've played Warrior a few times in LoE, but I don't think I've gotten any new cards. I just played the old Warrior cards. And it just seemed fine all along. It seemed pretty okay during TGT as well for me. But it seems that whenever I play against a warrior, it feels like a pretty easy game.
That's true.
So it's difficult to say a blanket statement like that. You know, I don't really understand where it is. I think it comes from the fact that I do still play a lot of decks very controlling, and I think it's very easy for control decks to just smash warrior decks. And warriors just generally kind of lose when they get tempoed out, like most decks, but warriors especially so, because you still don't have those board clears, and your weapons are far more useless if you're significantly behind on health.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this was I was talking about the Paladin and Keeper of Oldemon, where it brings kind of a new dimension to it. I don't know that Taunts brought a new, the Monkey and the Obsidian Destroyer. I don't know that it brought a new dimension to the Warrior, but in the arena, it does make it a actual viable thing to do, which it hadn't been since Classic, to kind of actually not die when you kind of have the board, kind of not, but you're getting kind of low on health because you'd already been using your weapons earlier. The warrior often gets into the situation at that point where you just get, the reach comes in, or your opponent puts some minions on the board, and you have to keep removing your opponent's minions, or they hit you to the face once and you're dead, and you have to do that for like 4 turns before you can armor up enough, and you cannot use any of your weapons from that point on, really, on like the decent sized targets that you want to hit, because you would lose like 3 turns of armor for every hit you do based on that. And now you have this nice thing where once you make the read that like, oh, my opponent doesn't have like direct damage reach, well, now my Obsidian Destroyer has a very good chance of taunting his like Yeti, and that is all I need to be able to do what I actually want to do, which is maybe go face, which is maybe do some different types of minion configurations on the board, rather than what I had needed to do, which is to kill the Yeti at all costs, or else I would die the next turn.
I think the good thing about the 2 new cards that the Warrior has gotten is, so part of the reason that Warriors have been weak is their inability to impact the board. For example, with the hero power, or just kind of non-pink classes have trouble impacting the board in a specific way, right? They can't shape or mold the board like pink classes can. But Taunt does that in a way, right? Taunt does that. But then the problem you have with Taunts is usually you give up stats. Like Senjin Shieldmaster is an amazing card, but it's still missing 1 attack from a Yeti. But because of the clutch taunt and the ability to change the board on turn 4, and the fact that 3 attack is usually enough for turn 4, it's such a premium card. And now that you have these taunts that can affect the board in this special way, and that you don't give up any stats for it, in fact, you gain stats from the Obsidian Destroyer. It's just crazy. It's so crazy good now, because now you can assess the situation and impact the board by playing taunts, which is, you're not pinging, but it's something that you can do that warriors weren't able to do before.
Yeah. I also feel that when I play warrior, I frequently have the mage days. Like it's 3 or 4 or 5 mages in the last few wins in arena, and usually those guys are playing closer to what I would see as a control deck, and I think warrior does very well to grind out mage decks, just because of your armor. Like the control mage is usually going to wait for a turn where they have an opportunity to tempo you out a little bit, but they can't really do that because you have a weapon, and when they tempo you out, they just try to just do those last few points of damage and maybe finish off with a fireball. They can't really do that either because you've been gaining armor for a few turns. So I think it has a favorable matchup against a very popular class, which is helping it now more than ever because it's more generally good as well.
I think the problem that you always will see with Warrior is that so back in like GVG and TGT, Paladin was it can be debated whether or not it was the #1 class, but it was a very popular class, and Warrior has always had a terrible matchup with Paladin.
Awful.
Like absolutely awful. Your hero power against the Paladin hero power, you lose every single time. If you go into a top deck war, like you guys are matching like back and forth 4 turns in a row. Well, suddenly the Paladin, after those 4 turns, has 4/4 worth of extra stats, and you have nothing. So your top decks need to be significantly better to basically outrace a Paladin in terms of top decking. So we'll see. We'll see how this works out.
Good luck with that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know.
I know we were talking about before, and with the paladin though, I think they tried. They like saw the problem, or it just so happened that this was the case. But then they put Death Spite out, which is a paladin dude killer. But you still have the warrior problem where you just don't have board clears. Revenge, fine, brawl, but really you don't have board clears. And I remember, I'm going back to the part where Krip, you said when you're creating the priest card that you're just okay creating a super overpowered priest card that's because priest just really needed it and it's not going to destroy the priest to have a really overpowered card. And I think that's exactly what they did with the warrior, where they came out and they said, look, Fierce Monkey is a 3/4 with the taunt. Like, that's a laughably overpowered card compared to what we, put out before. It's Dark Cultist level. Like, it's at the very top range of cards that we will kind of put out into the meta. And we do it because we think a particular class needs help. And so that's what the Warriors got in LoE. And in the arena, at least, I think the effect has been ridiculously huge between the drop in the TGT bonus of all the crappy TGT warrior cards and just these two cards being added that are so good. And I think a case could be made for the priest as well now that you're really not going to we're all going to hate it because it's so kind of like RNG the way whether you get that one drop in the early game with a Valence Chosen and you just end the game right there or not. But it's power wise it's an overpowered card that when you put into that class still doesn't make the class even like average, and so that's why it's okay.
I don't know if I'd agree that the warrior cards are overpowered. I think they're just like very good, but they're not overpowered. Like when you said they need like a dark cultist, I was just thinking it's like, yeah, there's nothing close to dark cultist in a 3 slot except maybe a peacekeeper.
Yeah,
I think that the main reason why dark cultist doesn't perform as well as he should is because priests are basically expected to have no board on turn 3. So yeah, when you play Dark Cultist on turn 3 and you have nothing else, it is a whatever card. But if you're winning and you play Dark Cultist on turn 3, you're not losing that game. So yeah, there's still room to be more powerful cards. Is what I'm saying. They can do more.
Yeah, that's true. I think you bring up a good point. Like, overstated doesn't exactly mean overpowered, right? Like, Obsidian Destroyer is it's overstated, but because it's late game and big late game cards, you see this with legendaries all the time. They are overstated, or they offer a lot more than what they should, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're overpowered because of the board state at that time and the advantage that the other player can kind of accumulate before you drop your bomb onto the board.
Yeah, I think one of the first kind of realizations that everyone makes on their way to becoming even like an above average arena player is, okay, let's understand exactly why the Yeti is so good, why the Spider Tank is so good, why the Pit Fighter is so good, compared to what seems to be insane cards like Force Tank Max, right? Or why a 1-drop is not, like a Murloc Raider does not carry the same kind of cachet that like a River Croc does, even though it seems like they're both dealing 2 damage. You can get one out for 1 less mana. Just in terms of just normal common sense thinking, what kind of leads you into these are very difficult questions to answer without fully understanding or like understanding to a large part how like tempo and card advantage and things like that work. If you play with that concept and you kind of bring it out, you can create these cards that look overpowered and are really like not overpowered at all.
Yep.
Let's do one more thing. I'm kind of curious.
Okay.
We talk about the warrior class. I mean, during TGT, like, I'm not even going to ask the question. We all thought warrior was the worst class. Okay, that's what we all thought. But like now, just on what we think, like, how would you rank the bottom 3 classes in arena in order of the worst being first? I can go first. Like, I go. So you guys have some time to think. I haven't had too much time to think, but I think priest is the worst. I don't see priests after like 5 wins. Just never see them. I don't know. If like I tried them, I don't do that well, and it seems other people don't do that well. And then I have to say shaman, just because I don't do that well, and they're still pretty rare. And when I do see them, it's like, yeah, okay, no shit, this guy got like 10 wins with this deck. But then third, I'd still say Warrior. Even though I've done well with him, I feel like I don't see other players at high wins with Warriors. And I know it's largely has to do with the fact that it's picked so infrequently, but it still seems that even when I do see them at high wins, I don't actually lose to them very frequently.
Yeah. So I'll go next, and I've actually thought about this. My list it's exactly the same as yours, and I'll say why. I think with Priest, a lot of people might be surprised that I rank it the lowest. Because you look at the cards that have come out this expansion, and Museum Curator, it's a very good card. You can grab a premium Death Rattle card, and Death Rattle cards are ridiculous, right? They're really good. Entomb is a really good removal, but while every other class throughout like the past 3 expansions have gotten early game, Priest has just gotten Shrinkmeister, and that's the only thing it's gotten. And with Shrinkmeister, you need something else on the board, so you already need to have the board. Priests have never gotten a card to help them establish the board, to like get a foothold on the board.
Veil is chosen.
Once again, you need something on the board. So if you keep on clearing it, and that's shown expansion after expansion, and now priests just are in this state where they don't have anything to establish an early game, and if they don't have anything to establish an early game, the whole entire premise of the class is you need something on the board. With Shaman, I'm terrible at the class. Like I don't think I'm good with the class, so it's tough for me to say. It's just so swingy, and it's very draft dependent. And I think it just might be my own bias because I don't think I'm a good Shaman player as well. But it's very swingy, very RNG focused, and once again, your hero power doesn't do anything. You need cards, like certain cards, to activate your hero power, and that's never something that you want. And I do agree. I think Warrior is third on the list now in terms of like third worst. I think the weapons are good, everything else is good. I would rate like Hunter as still a little bit better because I think Hunter's like the hero power that can be a win condition, right? Like the Warrior hero power is rarely your win condition. But for, I would say, over 50% of Hunter decks, your hero power is your win condition. You kind of run out of steam, but you keep on tapping them down to, hero powering them down to death. And then that's what really helps out these aggressive Hunter decks. For Warrior, you can try to get value, but a lot of times you will kind of be weakened by your inability to impact the board with your hero power, or just impact the board with kind of like your awkward class cards.
Okay. I think so. My opinion on Warrior is always going to swing wildly because I think in terms of the design of weapons, period, that the more weapons you have available to you, the better your class is just going to be in the hands of a good player, because it's one of the most difficult to use correctly and most flexible things that exist in the game. And so I think the Warrior is back. I don't want to say it's not in the bottom 3. It's probably where you guys have put it in the bottom 3, but it depends on what we're ranking it by, right? Like, is this ranking meant to say how most people will use it, or even how most good players will use these classes? In which case, I don't think most people get how the Warrior works. I think they're like, I think it's a highly difficult and unique class to play because your hero power really is not a win condition, and you really have to use certain class cards that other classes don't have to build it. But if we're going down that route and saying how do most other people use classes, then like Paladin should be like really high, right? So it depends on how you view that. If you're viewing it based on what I think the top potential of the player who is the best at playing a particular class is, then I think from what I've seen, Priest is still the worst. It was what I thought was the second worst class in TGT, and I still rarely see people who walk around and they're like, I am a really good priest player. Like, I normally average 7.5 wins per run with classes, and with priest I average 8.5. I don't see these people anywhere. No one's talking to me like that. Because I don't think they exist, or maybe one of these players exists. But there are people who are really good at Hunter, there are people who are really good at Shaman, and there's also not people like that for the Warrior as well. Well, a lot of people say, like, I think I do really well with the warrior. Well, how well? Well, like a good class, right? No one's going to come out and say it's one of the top classes. So I think warrior's still down there in the bottom 3. Probably, I would say it's second to last, maybe third to last. And I'm going to be super biased and go with shaman for the other one, just because I have no idea how to use the class. I've been really trying in the last 2 months to like figure out shaman again, and I haven't been able to. And in terms of my personal performance, hunter has not been working well for me in LoE. And so with a little more experience, maybe I figure out why. Maybe there's some systemic reason why LoE has made it so that the hunters no longer work as well, besides just the fact that they got crappy cards. Because hunters shouldn't really be affected as much by crappy cards as much as it's affected by how the meta moves. And same with the priest in that way. So priest has actually, personally for me, been working out better than I would expect, and hunter's been working out worse. So I'm not 100% on like, I'm not very confident at all at where the bottom classes are, but I am certain that warrior is no longer the worst based on my experience so far. And unless my next like 5 to 10 runs like show me a very different picture of where the warrior is going, I think we're back to the place where if you know how to use warrior, you can make it work kind of the same way like warlock, right? It's a very different class to play, but if you know how to work it, it can be very powerful.
Okay, I have no opinion on hunter, just that I lose to it enough that I don't think it's the worst 3. That's all.
Yeah. I used to do really well with it, and then since LoE has came in, it's just been like downhill. Yeah. So I don't know. All right, I think we're at the end of the Lightforge podcast. Thank you, Krip, for coming on our show. It's always wonderful to talk arena with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
And until next time, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.